You've got to give the Sadducees points. As trick questions go, theirs is a good one. It probably appears somewhere on internet lists of logical fallacies. They combine an ancient law that probably hasn't been used in centuries and a hypothetical situation that is, at best, implausible, and they come up with this question about resurrection. It's kind of ridiculous, and they know it. That's why they asked Jesus about this woman who had married 7 brothers. They're trying to trap Jesus into contradicting himself about resurrection. It would be easy to take the Sadducees down for doing this. Jesus has a complicated relationship with the Jewish leadership. Some of them are his allies, some are his opponents. And these Sadducees are clearly opposed to Jesus. But maybe we should thank them for bringing up the topic. One of the thorniest subjects in all Christianity, in my experience, is what happens after death. People ask about it pretty often. Some of the most interesting theological conversations I have are about exactly this. Death is frightening for most people. We want to believe there is something after this life. Something deep within us needs that reassurance. We know resurrection is the cornerstone of Christian hope. But we can hardly imagine what resurrection is like. And it's hard to trust in something you can't even imagine. Jesus doesn't rebuke the Sadducees for asking this trick question. He challenges them, he invites them to think beyond what is possible. Because with God, all things are possible. Perhaps Jesus' answer to this question isn't for the Sadducees alone. It's also an answer for us. The Sadducees were one of several sects in first century Judaism. They were centered in Jerusalem at the High Temple, and they were especially associated with the Jewish high priests. They are elites in Jerusalem society. We don't know much about the Sadducees' beliefs except what Luke indicates, that they said there was no resurrection. Most first century Jews did believe in some kind of resurrection, so not believing in it makes the Sadducees distinctive. To test Jesus, they go back to a very old practice called levirate marriage. It's described in the books of Genesis and Deuteronomy. Levirate marriage seeks to preserve the name of a family's oldest son. If he dies without children, his widow marries his next youngest brother, and any children they have will be considered the dead oldest brother's children. This form of marriage ensures that a widow has a man to protect her, which is necessary in a patriarchal society. It's a strange custom, but it makes some sense within that context. The Sadducees make up a scenario of 7 brothers. Brother number 1 dies childless, so brother number 2 marries his widow. Brother number 2 also dies childless, so brother number 3 also marries her, and on down the line until all 7 brothers have married the woman. The Sadducees ask, in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? Let's take the Sadducees at their word that this is a real situation, a real family. Seems unlikely, but okay. And let's consider this from the woman's point of view. We know hardly anything about her, only that she seems unable to conceive. Having a baby, having a son, would get her out of these levirate marriages, but it hasn't happened. That must be a source of sorrow and pain for her. Who knows how she feels about having to marry all these men? Maybe she likes her brothers-in-law. Maybe they're the sort of awful relatives you put up with at Thanksgiving because you have to. Maybe she isn't into men at all. At least by the time she marries brother number 4, these men are probably unenthusiastic about having to marry her. She's another mouth to feed, but she's not providing anything in return. That's a recipe for being resented. This woman doesn't seem able to make her own choices about life, or even decide who she is. She's always so-and-so's widow. Everywhere she goes, people point at her and gossip. Can you imagine? 7 husbands and no baby. It must be exhausting and humiliating. The Sadducees don't seem to see her as a real person. She's an abstraction to them, maybe even expendable once she has proved their point. But to Jesus, she is a full human being, created in God's image and beloved. And because Jesus sees her as a whole person, Jesus can see beyond the role that her marriage has cast her in. Jesus can see that she desperately needs God to do something new in her life, something that will free her from these marriages and the heartbreak of infertility. So Jesus points to resurrection. In the resurrection, there is no marriage. The institution that has brought this woman such grief, such dehumanization, and even exploitation will no longer exist. She's no one's wife in the resurrection. She gets to be herself. Imagine what that feels like for her. Relief, joy, liberation. Her marriages and her fertility stop dominating her life. People have no cause to gossip about her anymore. It must feel like freedom, like a completely new life. And in that new life, in that resurrection, we see the kingdom of God. Wherever there is new life in the midst of death, there is the kingdom of God. Wherever dehumanization turns to freedom, wholeness, and healing, there is the kingdom of God. We get glimpses of God's kingdom in this life. In a teaspoon of yeast leavening a whole measure of flour, in a tiny mustard seed growing into the largest of shrubs, in a son who was lost being found. Resurrection is the full realization of the kingdom of God. Instead of a glimpse, it's a panoramic view. Resurrection is the fulfillment of God's will of justice, freedom, and love for all people. We will experience it after we die, and it is also available to us now, in this life. The Sadducees can't see this. Not, I think, because of their beliefs about resurrection, but because they are the priestly elite of Jerusalem and they have everything they need. They don't want God to do a new thing in their lives. They think their lives are just fine as they are. And that means they are missing out on the kingdom of God. Debbie Thomas observes, maybe resurrection only makes sense to those who desperately need it. This woman married to 7 brothers really needs resurrection, so it makes perfect sense to her. Of course, God is always making things new. But only those who know they need resurrection can see God making it happen. The eminent Old Testament scholar Walter Brueggemann died earlier this year, and in his honor, the podcast On Being with Krista Tippett reran an interview with him from 2011. It still feels fresh and timely now, much like the prophets that Brueggemann spent so much of his life with. Speaking of the prophets, Isaiah and Jeremiah and their companions, Walter Brueggemann said, "The amazing contemporaneity of this material is that the issues are the same, that the world we have trusted in is vanishing before our eyes, and the world that is coming at us feels like a threat to us. We can't see the shape of it." That seems even more true to me in 2025, as our nation's government has gone from dysfunctional to completely stalled. Cruelty for the sake of cruelty is the norm of policy and behavior. Fewer and fewer of the powerful are even pretending to address the climate emergency that is only getting worse. And AI is at the beginning of reshaping the way human beings think and interact with each other. Change on this scale makes us uncomfortable, uneasy. But Walter Brueggemann suggests that unease can be holy. Ignatius of Loyola says the same thing. We'll get into that in Adult Formation next Sunday. Unease can be holy because it reminds us that we need resurrection. And when we recognize how much we need resurrection, we can see God making it happen. We can see the new creation of the kingdom of God coming into being right in front of us. I don't know exactly what resurrection might look like for us. I doubt the woman married to 7 brothers could have dreamed that the end of marriage was possible. It was so far beyond her imagination that she couldn't even envision it. But with God, all things are possible. And that is where we put our trust, in God who desires justice, freedom, and love for us, and is even now bringing it into being for all God's people. My prayer for us is that we are like this woman, that we can admit how much we need resurrection, that we will allow God to surprise us with the vastness of the kingdom of God, far beyond what we can imagine for ourselves, and that we too will know the relief, joy, and liberation God gives in the new life of resurrection.